Hello everybody and welcome to today's webcast, Managing Workday Configuration and Security to Help Create Value and Mitigate Risks. My name is Jamie Draper. I'm joined by Errol Ramdarie and Gurmeet Sawhney. I'll give an introduction to those guys in a minute and a little bit more about myself. But first I want to go through some administrative matters with regards to the presentation today. So we have a disclaimer particularly relevant to anybody out there who is an external audit client of PricewaterhouseCoopers. So certain matters reviewed today may represent services that PwC may be prohibited from providing to our audit clients. In those instances, the information is being provided to inform you of options that you may want to consider as you evaluate the solution described on today's webcast. Due to the complexity of independence rules, any potential services for our audit clients should be discussed in advance within the context of the independence rules. The information contained in this document is provided as is for general guidance on matters of interest only. PricewaterhouseCoopers is not herein engaged in rendering legal, accounting, tax, or other professional advice and services. Before making any decision or taking any action, you should consult a competent professional advisor. The other disclaimer we've got is that the functionality that we're going to cover today is relevant as of Workday Release 26, and I will cover a little bit more about that later on when I do an introduction to Workday. So, continuing the administrative matters, some basic things. For better viewing experience, close all applications. For better sound, use headphones. To enlarge the slides, click on the bottom right corner of the slide window and drag to the desired size. A question we get asked a lot, is the presentation available for download? Yes, it is. You can click on the resources widget at the bottom of the screen and download the presentation. Another thing, there is a chat on the screen where you can submit a question. We do encourage you to ask questions as we go through the presentation. To the extent that questions come up that are relevant, that I'll interject during the presentation and try and answer. We will answer all the questions that are presented to us today, but we may, given time, have to do that with an email response at the end. So please keep the questions coming and definitely want to try and help answer as many of those as we can. And last, if you experience any technical difficulties during the polling sessions, reply to the questions in the Q&A window and include the poll number, which I will cover right now as we get on to the CPE. So that's in relation to the CPE credits. So in order to get the CPE credits, you need to stay on for the entire program and you need to respond to the polling questions. So the polling questions will come up. I'll read them. The polling questions will stay on the screen for about 2 minutes in a widget. There will be a timer for those 2 minutes. We will actually advance the presentation before the polling question goes, just so that we don't have too much sort of silent time whilst we're going through. And as I mentioned before, if for some reason you're having a difficulty responding to a polling question, please do submit your answer to the polling question in the chat. You do have to do that during the 2 minutes that the polling question is open. You can't just wait until the end and submit your answer for all of the 4 polling questions. At the end, there is a CPE icon that you need to click on to fill out in order to get that CPE. And at the bottom of this screen, there's just some information about if you're viewing with multiple people. Okay, so just so you can see who we are and put faces to names, as I mentioned before, my name is Jamie Draper. I'm a partner based out of San Francisco. Errol and Gurmeet are both based out of New York. There's a little bit about our background here, but the information I want to cover, so my background is SAP. So there may be folks on the phone that on the webcast that know me from doing SAP work. That's my background, and Errol and Gurmeet have a background in Oracle. What happened is, we've seen Workday become very predominant in our clients, particularly within the HCM space. And we're now seeing more and more companies look to Workday for their financials, for their enterprise resource planning system. And so with that, we have in our advisory practice a group that does the Workday implementations, and then the team that you're seeing here is focused on doing the risk and controls element for Workday. And really what we've done is sort of taken folks that have had careers or specialized within risk and controls to bring that knowledge on how to do that and apply it to a very different environment. And so that's who's presenting today on this webcast. And then the objectives of today's webcast, we want to discuss the security and control concepts around Workday. We want to talk about how to mitigate risk and how to maintain a sustainable and secure Workday environment. And we want to highlight the reporting capabilities, and in particular Workday's Auditor Dashboard that we're seeing a lot of companies use, and we're definitely using and helping companies understand how to use the Auditor Dashboard for risk and controls. So moving on, and I mentioned that I'll give a little bit of an overview as to Workday. I'm not going to go into this slide in a huge amount of detail because I'm hoping that the folks that are on the webcast either have Workday or are looking at Workday and at least understand what it is. But a couple of key, and the polling question that I'll do on the next slide will actually get to that. A couple of concepts that I do want to make sure that we understand. Workday is a true cloud service. It's a software as a service solution where you pay on a subscription model. You don't have the infrastructure yourself. That infrastructure is managed by Workday themselves. So that's very different from the sort of traditional ERPs that I mentioned before, sort of the SAPs and Oracles that we've kind of grown up and been used to. And that presents different risks and controls and challenges from that aspect because of the way that the system is hosted. The other thing, Workday really started off and got a great footing in the human capital management space, the HR space, and we're seeing that Workday is, as we said, coming in a lot of our clients, particularly in that space. But I did want to make sure that we covered that they do have the full financial suite. So they do have the full enterprise resource planning system that a number of companies are looking at and implementing now as well. So it really is an end-to-end solution that we're seeing out in the marketplace. So that's really what I wanted to cover as a concept as we go forward. And I'm going to take us into our first polling question right now. So the question, where are you currently in your Workday journey? A, evaluating Workday. Excuse me. B, in the process of implementing Workday. C, completed the implementation of Workday. D, Workday Financial Management. Or E, Workday HCM. So if you can submit your answer to that would be great. And one of the things, like I say, I'll give about a minute to answer that question. The polling question will stay live for 2 minutes on the widget that you see on your screen. Whilst you're answering that, I'll look at the Q&A questions. And a quick question that's come in that I'll ask whilst we're here: is Workday SOX compliant? And I think Errol, probably a good time for me to introduce you and welcome you to the webcast. Say hi. So Errol, do you want to take this first question of is Workday SOX compliant?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. So happy to join the webcast and share some of our perspectives. Regarding whether Workday is SOX compliant, we do get that question quite often. And the answer is Workday is an important part of how you as an organization get to SOX compliance. And as part of that, Workday does have a SOC 1 report, which identifies all of the controls that they manage and operate, and then obviously an independent auditor provides an opinion on the operating effectiveness of those controls. So as part of that SOC 1, you would take that and use that as a basis for gaining comfort over those controls. An important part of that process, though, is also fully understanding those user control considerations, which, as an organization, you have a responsibility to have those controls that will interact and enable those other controls that Workday owns. So the answer is, it is an important part of your SOX compliance, and the SOC 1 report that Workday issues is an important component of achieving SOX compliance. It's not a standalone item where, as long as you get that report, you can say your SOX compliance with Workday.
Great, thanks, Errol. And then I'm just going to answer real quickly. There was a quick question that came in. What is Workday HCM? HCM is the human capital management. I mentioned earlier that Workday has its roots in the human resources space. So the human capital management is everything from talent acquisition through to onboarding people, managing HR benefits, payroll, and that component. So what I'm going to do a quick refresh, and then I'm going to push the results to the screen. So, and maybe this could have been sort of looked at a little bit differently, because I guess a lot of folks with the financials management may have the HCM module as well. But the majority of folks here are looking at evaluating Workday, which, although there is a very high percentage that have completed the implementation, that isn't surprising. I think, we're seeing more and more that companies are looking at Workday in order to, determine whether it is a fit. My guess is that a lot of folks are evaluating the HCM component first. But as I said, we are seeing a number of companies adopt the financials management ERP process. And with that, I'm going to move us on and hand over to Errol to take the next slide.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. And, Jamie said between the three of us, we've got a significant amount of experience in risk and controls around the ERP space. But as we started this Workday journey for ourselves about a year and a half ago, we did see that we get questions around some core concepts around risk and controls, and thought this would be a good place to start this around what are some of the typical risk and control considerations. And I think that's tied into a lot of Workday's initial customers were in the HCM or human capital space, where to a limited degree SOX is relevant, but may not have had that exposure. So around risk and controls, it really starts with the basic concept of achieving control objectives around your core COSO components. So when you think about risk and controls, certainly financial reporting is an important part of it in achieving SOX compliance. But there are also regulatory compliance risks that we see come up all the time in this space, and certainly achieving other operational objectives and addressing operational risk as far as compliance with company policy. So that is a key area of focus around addressing broad control objectives. But wanted to also cover some of the specific areas within that where we will touch on a few of them in detail in the rest of this webcast, but wanted to highlight a few others. So the petals around this slide, business process controls, if you think about whether it's a human capital process or a financial process, there are significant opportunities to integrate and embed controls into those business process design, address security and segregation of duties. And those two petals in this circle we'll spend some time around. But another area as we go around the circle that we see quite often, particularly in the HCM space, is privacy, where from addressing privacy risks around personal identifiable information, PII, data. And to the question that was asked earlier about SOX compliance, IT general controls, given that this is a SaaS solution, it tends to be an area of change when you look at what your IT general controls framework would look like compared to other legacy systems. Another key point that I wanted to make on this slide is that yellow highlighted box where there's certainly benefit in many of the pre-configured Workday business process definitions that you get, which accelerates the implementation. But you need to look at that from a risk and control perspective to see how you can address and achieve your risk and control objectives. Moving on to the next slide here. So when we talk about risk and controls, one of the things that we've seen in our experience with other ERPs is controls have typically been layered on top of those ERPs, and they've really been put in after the fact, which tends to result in a lot of manual detective controls. In this case, given the highly configurable nature of Workday, we see a significant opportunity to embed controls more upfront and really drive more automation of those controls, but also thinking of it more holistically. So thinking of it beyond just security, looking at those regulations or governance controls that you may have overlain on your legacy ERP or other processes, and looking to see where you can embed that into the Workday solution. So the key point here is we see there's a significant opportunity to enable what are typically called GRC capabilities, or governance, risk, and compliance capabilities, into the Workday solution as you implement a Workday solution. Moving on to the next slide. So we've kind of talked a little bit, and again at a conceptual level, of what controls are and why this represents an opportunity to address controls in the Workday solution. This really touches on when. In the polling question, we saw that about 50% of the respondees are either evaluating or in process of implementing a Workday solution. And that's really the first part of this, where there is a significant opportunity to leverage that change process, and where you're going through the solutioning and the implementation part of this, to really embed those controls. And it really starts with assessing what is your control impact in each of your areas that you're putting in. And again, thinking broadly, more broadly than just financial reporting, thinking about regulatory compliance and operational controls. However, we also saw that a number of you have already gone live in Workday, and where that doesn't mean if you didn't do it up front, there isn't an opportunity there. And the approach is slightly different, where you would perform a controls impact assessment to understand the impact of controls, where the opportunities are, and determine a roadmap where you can identify some low-hanging fruit, some short-term areas where you can enable some of those controls in the short term, and then have a plan for a longer roadmap to capture that value. So again, the key point here is that regardless of where you are in the journey, the ideal time is from a pre-go live, where you can embed those into your change process and implementation process, or if you've already gone live, is doing that assessment to determine where you have those short-term and long-term areas to implement those control activities. Okay. And I'll turn over to Gurmeet to take us through the next section of going through some lessons learned.
Great. And thanks, Errol. We just went through what are controls and when can value of controls be captured. In the following slides, I'm going to cover the how and the where of where controls can be captured. One of the things we also talked about in previous slides is the SOX compliant needs. And one of the things I'd like to point out, while there are controls that are managed and operated by Workday as a data processor, there are also certain controls that need to be managed by the data owner, which are the companies that use Workday. The typical ERP systems, it was either by the nature of the implementation or in the pre-Sarbanes-Oxley world, were primarily configured to transact first to get the business up and running, and the security and controls were layered on after the fact. Workday provides an opportunity to embed the controls within your business processes. And when we talk about embedding controls within Workday, we're really talking about leveraging the configurable capability of Workday, in other words, the configurable controls. Controls can be configured in 4 different ways, either through business processes, through configurable security, the tenant setup, or managed and monitored through the Auditor Dashboard. For those of you who are still evaluating Workday, a tenant is really a secure instance of the Workday application that's unique to each customer and is configured to your business needs. The benefit of configuring controls is really having controls integrated within your business processes. Therefore, you don't need any separate control activities to be performed by a group of specialists that are focused on controls. It just follows the rhythm of the business and allows you to transact on your business transactions while having controls embedded in it, which really gives you the agility to evolve as Workday evolves as a solution, but also as your business changes, which really enables the sustainability of your controls environment over a period of time. I'll spend a little bit of time going through each one of the 4 components that I just talked about. The first one I mentioned was business processes. The building block of that is really business process definitions that allow you to define the key business processes, whether they're in the human capital management space or the financial management space. And the business process definition elements can range from anything that is an action that is performed as a part of the workflow. It could be a to-do that is performed outside of the Workday application, or could be a manual activity. You could have approvals within a workflow that help get the right level of authorization for transactions. You could have condition rules that could vary the outcome of the business process depending on the variability of the business process. Or it could be a notification. You just probably want to know if a certain type of transaction occurred and just be aware of that. But the combination of these 5 business process definition elements together can give you the level of control that's needed to suit your business or control needs, or it could be one of the business process elements. But it depends on how you would want to build a control environment. I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about the control intelligence, the specifics of how controls and intelligence could be built into the business processes. And to do that, we are going to use the use case of termination business process. For those of you who are familiar with Workday, the workflow on the screen is going to look familiar. It is adapted from what it would look like within your Workday tenant. It is a snapshot of a part of the overall termination process to illustrate some examples of how controls intelligence can be built into it. At the bottom of the screen, for illustrative purposes, there are some risk and controls. Obviously, they are purely for illustration purposes and not necessarily something that could be used verbatim. However, to focus on the workflow, the if statements you see are really the condition rules, and as an example, the pink box at the bottom that you see, which is to do remove security, really is and provides you the ability to build a condition if, for example, a worker has user-based security groups, to put in a to-do that allows you to have a point within the workflow where their security groups are disabled upon termination or changed. There may be situations where you may want to provide the workers access to certain parts of Workday post-employment for their benefits or whatnot. So it's either taking away their privileges or changing them, but also gives you an opportunity to build into the workflow if there are any other ancillary systems where they may have access. The fact about a to-do is you can also embed things like there may be other parts of your termination process, such as collecting security badges, laptops, all of that could be built in to the workflow. Obviously, Workday cannot validate those events have actually occurred, but gives you a point in the workflow where that check mark does take place before an employee is terminated. Of course, you can use the condition rules to also have a consistent outcome to the termination process, but introduce the flexibility or the variability depending on the geographic location of your workers. You may have workers in certain territories that may require a Works Council approval around termination. That could be built into the process. Or in some territories where there's involuntary termination, there may be company policies around severance pay or whatnot that could also be built within the process. I'd also like to share an example of control intelligence within the financial management space, and we're using the use case of an accounting journal event. As most of you would be familiar, you can obviously build the approvals required around manual journal entries, either through the revenue manager, the accounting manager, whoever the appropriate stakeholders are for evaluating the appropriateness of manual journal entries. What you can also do is introduce into your business process the ability to attach supporting documentation for your journal entry. That enables the approver to have access to the support that's needed to approve the manual journal entries, but also provides ease during the period of audit where some of these supporting documents are needed. Again, Workday cannot validate the completeness and accuracy of the support, but it provides you an opportunity within the workflow to allow the users to attach supporting documentation to enable the review and approval. It can also be configured to capture electronic signatures if that's needed within the workflow. With that, we're moving on to our next polling question. Jamie?
Great, Gurmeet. Thanks for that. So our next polling question, what area do you think represents the greatest challenge or risk to your organization? A, security, segregation of duties and sensitive access. B, controls, the business process controls and configurable controls. C, audit reports and analytics. D, controls, governance and sustainability. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you're having trouble answering, please answer the question in the chat. The widget will stay open for about 2 minutes. I'm going to just answer some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A. And what I'm going to, there's a lot of questions come up on, are we going to talk about some examples of controls, business processes? I think they came up just before Gurmeet did the sections, the 2 slides that he's done. So hopefully that's answered those questions. The next section we're going to move on to is going to talk in more detail about security, and there was a number of questions that came up on security. An interesting question that came up, if I'm understanding it correctly, was around segregation of duties, and we do talk about how to run reports on segregation of duties. Workday doesn't come with pre-configured rules or anything like that that define where your segregations should be. So some of the other ERP systems I think that folks are used to may be used to rule sets that are provided as a starting point. We're generally working with companies to help them do that, to define what those relevant rules are. And a lot of that is going to depend on the extent of the functionality that's implemented in Workday as to what's actually appropriate or not. And the last thing I'll touch on, there were a number of questions about the Auditor Dashboard. The last section that we're going to cover today is going to be the Auditor Dashboard, so we will be showing a little bit of that. So hopefully that will address those questions. But please keep putting the questions, and as I said, we'll try and answer as many as we can, and those that we don't get to, we will get to after the presentation. We'll follow up with answers to those questions. So thank you for everybody who's submitting questions. So to have a quick look at the answers to this of the areas, it looks like the segregation of duties and sensitive access is the biggest concern to folks out there, closely followed by the business process controls. Probably not surprising given, the regulatory world that we live in and the fact that we've got SOX compliance and other regulatory compliance needs, that security and the business process controls is up there. Security probably as well from the cyber perspective with the threats that are out there. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Gurmeet to talk a little bit more and cover security.
Great, thanks, Jamie. So to just quickly level set on some of the components of security, we'll start off talking about securable items, which are really the most granular element that can be secured within Workday. Securable items are things such as actions or tasks or reports element, data sources and fields that can be secured through one of the 3 ways that we have on this slide. You could achieve that through domain security policies or through security groups or through business process security policies. Domain security policy really is a set of related secureable items that are combined within a domain. A domain is something such as process journals or managed spend authorization, compensation chain. These are groups of related actions, field reports that can be used together. Security groups are really a collection of users. Either they are user-based security groups or role-based security groups that can be used to control access to secureable items, or through business process security policies that are essentially securable items that are linked to each one of the business processes. And the key point here really is that Workday allows a lot of flexibility in being able to achieve the level of security that's needed from a business and from a control standpoint for your Workday tenant. With that, how is really security implemented at the user level? So much like some of the other ERPs you might be familiar with, users can be assigned to role-based security or user-based security. The difference being user is a collection of individuals performing a similar role, or users having a very targeted access based on their individualized role within the company. However, the users can also be categorized within what's called organization, and they can be grouped within a supervisory org, a cost center, location, so that you can target security specifically based on one of those organizational elements. The security groups can also further be then related to domain security policies or business process policies. Domain security policies really define which security groups can view or modify what data within each one of the domains. Business process policies define which security groups can take action within a business process. And security groups we just talked about really represent a group of users who will perform actions or share similar duties. With that sort of baseline of security, one of the questions that came up or the responses that came through polling was one of the greatest area of challenge was around segregation duties and sensitive access. We'd like to talk a little bit about sensitive access. So sensitive access is really a level of elevated or privileged access to data or transactions, and that would typically come through your user-based security groups, though some of the roles may have sensitive access as well. The one use case we'd like to highlight here is Workday implementer accounts. These are really very, very helpful and important accounts during an implementation, but they allow the ability to execute, change, and view most transactions and data within Workday. So post-implementation and post-stabilization phase, these are accounts that can be looked into for either being minimized or being completely eliminated within the Workday tenant. There are also other types of sensitive access, such as report output sharing, which may allow users to view data that they would not otherwise have access to. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about segregation of duties conflicts. It's really individuals with sensitive access or transactional access, when combined with other types of access they may have to the system, may lead to conflicts of interest. One of the use cases we have here is create a modify customer versus refund a customer. This we created a custom report to capture the security groups that are overlapping assignments, enabling a person to create a customer and then issue a refund, thereby creating a segregation of duties conflict. One of the things to note here is while there are security groups, assignment, and domain security policies that are being applied here, there are also, as Workday releases have come out, previously refund customer versus create modify customer were both not in business process definition. and now Workday provides you the ability to also further control the access through business process definition. What that means is as Workday releases come about, you should look at the segregation of duty conflicts reports that you may have created to modify them as and when some of these functionalities change. Moving on to the next level of control that can be applied to your configurable controls, there's also the opportunity to build controls intelligence within tenant setup, and there are a variety of controls that can be achieved through tenant setup. For example, within financials, you can achieve work tag restrictions in business processes. You can manage task delegation, security passwords, staffing models. You can implement restrictions around hiring. A quick use case around the tenant setup is around the routing of delegation of authority. While delegation of authority is a good complement to your controls, what you can achieve through tenant setup are restrictions based on how long that delegation will be enabled for a user, having specific dates so that there's not unlimited amount of time where a delegation of authority could function. And you could also apply routing restrictions to either superiors or peers. And these kind of controls can be achieved through tenant setup. Moving on, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking through control sustainability with Workday semi-annual releases. As you are aware, Workday has semi-annual releases where new functionality, which may include new business processes, reports, integration capabilities, or new enhancements. As they are introduced, our recommendation is that the company evaluate the impact to their controls, as in, are there any changes to reports, integrations, any changes to configurable controls, but really view this as an opportunity to continuously improve your controls environment. There are usually new features and functionality that's provided which may help you enhance your maybe previously manual controls and automate them further, or find better opportunities to monitor your control. But there's an opportunity to continuously improve and update your controls environment with the semi-annual releases of Workday. And with that, we're up onto our next polling question. Jamie, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Gurmeet. Come on up on the screen. So just a slight technical. Okay, so the question that we've got: have you leveraged Workday's Auditor Dashboard functionality to continuously monitor risk in real time? A, yes, familiar with Workday's Auditor Dashboard functionality. B, no, have not leveraged Workday's Auditor Dashboard yet. Or C, evaluating other GRC tools. We'll give you a minute to answer that question. And again, if you have challenges, please post the answer to the chat. Questions that have come in had a number of questions around interfaces that I'll actually get Gurmeet to comment on briefly in a second. There was another question that came on that's sort of tied to interfaces, or I'm tying it to interfaces. That's me mentally. It may not be. Which was where a common frauds occurring within Workday, and my sort of joking answer would be that the frauds happen within the company, not necessarily within the system itself. But taking that to my linkage to interfaces, it really depends on how much of the system you're using and what you're using in the system, and then what the vulnerabilities are within your business processes. So, and I'll give a specific example. I have, a company that is doing all of their recruiting and onboarding through Workday, but their payroll is being done through their back-end ERP system, which is not Workday. So you've got that gap, that interface gap there. And so what we've helped the company do is create analytics to identify where they're making payments to people that are not being onboarded with having an associated recruitment record, for example. So it's kind of a broad question. The risks aren't any different within the business processes as they are with any other system. It's just understanding how those business processes work for your organization and where those frauds can occur. And then, Gurmeet, if you can answer very briefly some considerations for interfaces for Workday.
So I think one of the common questions we get around the security and controls is what kind of sensitive access is related to interfaces, and really it's the access component around EIBs, Enterprise Interface Builder, that needs to be looked at as you're preparing a security framework for your Workday tenant.
Great, thanks. And we can we'll provide some more examples in the follow-ups we do after this. So looking at the answer to this, I mean, this is a great answer as we're going to move into the next section on the Auditor Dashboard, that 80% of people have not leveraged that dashboard and have probably not seen it. So hopefully this next section that Errol is going to do will be insightful as it relates to the Auditor Dashboard. So Errol.
Thanks, Jamie. And it is a common related question that we get around Workday is where is the Workday GRC module? And for those, again, who aren't familiar with GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, these are the modules that are usually overlay control activities onto the traditional ERPs. But in the Workday case, those GRC capabilities are really embedded into the business process design, into the security design, as Gurmeet walked through earlier. And what the Auditor Dashboard is the GRC-like reporting aspect of the tool. So the Auditor Dashboard is a centralized place for monitoring control activity and reporting control activity with visualization. And what that allows you to do is to be able to create and report on things like segregation of duties, sensitive access, business process controls. So, and again, this is across all of the key control areas that I'd mentioned, around financial operation and compliance. Another question that I did see that came up in the Q&A was what does it look like? This is a snapshot on this slide of what the Auditor Dashboard can look like, which on the upper left-hand corner of this is really the home screen of Workday, in which one of the icons is the Auditor Dashboard. And through that portal there is where you've got an example to the upper right of a visualization of a particular control analytic around payments. So you can apply visualization for various types of control analytics. Then down the bottom is a report around an access control monitoring report. So here again is where you can leverage some of the standard Workday reports or develop some or configure some custom reports. And the next couple of slides wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what are some of the reports that are available for the Auditor Dashboard. and there are reports around expenses or the organization and SOD. In our experience, those reports are fairly basic as being able to achieve what a specific organization is looking to achieve. Where we do find those organizations that really get the benefit of the Auditor Dashboard is where they leverage the advanced reporting capability of Workday to develop those and configure those custom reports. And we've worked with a number of organizations where we have developed their custom reports for segregation of duties. As Gurmeet pointed out earlier in the presentation, access is not only embedded in your roles from a user perspective, but also in the business process. So it's important to understand that fully in order to truly understand what your segregation of duty conflicts are, and that can be embedded in some of these custom SOD framework reports. Similar with business process controls, whether it's security or those configurations that you've determined as an automated control, and you can monitor those control areas leveraging the Auditor Dashboard. So again, it's really powerful capability on the reporting and monitoring of controls from an audit perspective. And this is where we found that control owners can leverage this to monitor their own activity, as well as those that are either auditing or independently monitoring those control activities. Moving on to some other security and control considerations, I also did see some questions come up around what are some of the super user type access that needs to be considered. And again, as Gurmeet had pointed out, the implementer account is an important one, but there are others, such as security administrator, business process administrator, and so on. So as part of your assessment of not just access but controls, it's understanding what is the impact of these other accounts, of password parameters, and so on as it relates to monitoring privileged access. In addition, your IT general controls is also another area that needs to be considered. As Gurmeet pointed out about the every 6 months updates in the releases, making sure that as part of your change process, but also as part of your access monitoring, you're incorporating your IT general controls into those areas. So to bring this all together, we talked about what control areas you should be considering, when you should be thinking about controls, what are some examples of embedding security and controls into the business process, into roles and segregation of duties, and how you monitor that. Here is where we're really talking about an approach to really implementing and capturing all of those concepts, and this is a holistic look at it. And it really starts on the left side of this slide, where you're thinking and evaluating what your control, your governance, risk, and control requirements are, and making sure that you're thinking broadly and leveraging the opportunity to embed more than just SOX controls or financial reporting controls, but thinking about data privacy and protection and some of the other operational and compliance areas that you can embed into the solution. The middle part of this is really integrating those security and control activities into the design, leveraging the Workday security design and how those roles are going to be determined, the business process design, and embedding automated and manual control activities into those business process, and access and SOD controls into the security framework, all the way through the implementation methodology of Workday, from plan to deploy. What comes out of that activity are really your risk and controls design, your segregation of duties, your IT policies, and so on. But the outcome, the benefit that you truly get from this is it's reduced risk exposure. You address compliance in a much more automated way, and you deploy a security and controls framework that's more sustainable over time. This is this is our perspective on taking an integrated approach into security and controls implementation. And with that, we'll go into our final poll question. Jamie?
Great, thanks, Errol. So the last question for the webcast is, in your organization, who is responsible for managing Workday access risks? A, business functions, so HR or finance. B, the IT organization. C, compliance risk management or internal audit. D, a third party. Or E, not sure. So again, give a minute for that, and we're going to be wrapping up after this. Questions that have been coming in, there was some questions around getting the Auditor Dashboard and whether you had to pay for it. The Auditor Dashboard is part of the Workday system, so you get it if you have Workday, and you get it with the HCM module and with the financial module. So hopefully that helps folks that we're trying to look at that. A question that came up a little bit earlier that I was going to come back to, Gurmeet, I'm going to ask you this one. We had a number of questions around change management controls. If you're able to just talk a little bit about change management and how that works within Workday, that would be great.
Sure. So from a change management standpoint, it's really, as most of the attendees would be aware, that as a user, you do not get access to modify the code for Workday. What is considered as, from an audit speak, population of your Workday are what's considered in your population of changes is really any configurations that may include business processes, any of the configurable controls we talked about, and how does the company manage changes to some of those significant and key configurations is what would fall under change management. It is a topic that would warrant a little bit more discussion, and I don't know if you have time to get into that right now, but that's the general theme. And it's also similar, what the question came up around interfaces. I think that also warrants a little bit more discussion. But the population is really looking at your key configurations, reports, business processes.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left, so I think we can follow up with some examples and some more detail of both the interfaces and with change management. So just to go through the results of this question, the majority of folks are managing the access risk through the business functions with IT, presumably playing a support. A lot of people are unsure. And with that, I'm actually going to wrap up the webcast. So just to go through some final thoughts and to recap what we've covered today, security and business process controls can be tightly integrated into the business process. One thing I did want to talk about, the ideal time to integrate controls in Workday is during an implementation, but it can be done post-go live. There was actually a question that came up about common mistakes made with Workday implementations. I think what we're seeing a little bit of is because the HCM module is generally sort of owned and taken by the HR organization, sometimes controls aren't necessarily considered as part of the implementation as much as they are if you've got the financials package. So making sure that you consider those would be one of the recommendations I've got there. Workday, obviously with the infrastructure that's in place, offers a different platform to look at how you have your controls and the ability to relook and automate your controls, leveraging some of the workflow. The Auditor Dashboard, hopefully we gave you a little bit of an insight into that and how powerful that tool can be. And it's definitely going to be a great tool to leverage in the organization to monitor controls. A quick plug about us. I mentioned before that we have our advisory practice that does the Workday implementations. We are a platinum level partner. I think on a couple of our bios, Gurmeet and myself, along with Neil Chua, who's a director in the West, we sit on Workday's Auditor Advisor Council to help understand controls and drive controls into the auditing community. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody for their participation. We're 1 minute past the hour, so I will wrap up the webcast. So thank you very much.